Alienor is a professional speaking coach at Ultra Speaking, a world-class communication school that trains students to speak with ease in every interaction.
You can see the moment where someone realizes that they can speak in a different way, and you can see that they're physically speaking differently.
What's the cost of playing it safe and not speaking out?
If you're telling yourself you have to think before you speak every single time that you speak, you're telling yourself, I don't trust what comes out of my mouth naturally.
What would you say are the biggest mindset shifts or the most common that you can become more confident when you speak?
The biggest one that applies to everyone would be,
Tell me about that transformation. What happened?
I didn't know what my life would look like after I did it. I thought I'd just get better at presenting in meetings. I now no longer present in meetings. I lead 100-person workshops. I'm a public speaking coach. I've quit that job because I discovered a whole new version of myself.
Great speaking is as much about mindset as it is about skill set.
It's not true that you're not good. I've never seen anyone ever who's not capable of becoming the kind of speaker they want to become.
You coach hundreds of students through these transformations. Someone comes to you, they say, I want to speak with confidence. Where do you take them right from the very first step?
It's actually related to
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A Better Way to Say. Today I have with me Alienor Hunter. Alienor is a professional speaking coach at Ultra Speaking, a world-class communication school that trains students to speak with ease in every interaction. Alienor's journey from a timid speaker, she was once so shy that talking to a cashier at the supermarket caused her massive anxiety, to now a skilled communication coach is both shocking and inspiring. Alienor specializes in helping students become confident communicators that aren't just good at speaking, but actually enjoy it. And today she's sharing exactly how you can become a confident speaker, the mistakes that are holding you back, and some communication hot takes. So let's get into it. Alienor, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Celeste.
I want to start with you. You are a public speaking coach. What exactly does that mean? What are you doing day to day and helping your students do?
I help people feel more confident when they're communicating, whatever that means to them. Most people come to me because they're having trouble communicating at work. Maybe they've just got promoted and they're in a new position of responsibility they're not used to, or maybe their manager told them they should speak up more in meetings. And then we work together to help them feel more comfortable, more confident to express themselves in a way that feels like them, but also feels good at work and also throughout their lives.
Yeah, so it kind of trickles down into not just their work life, but you see them opening up in their other areas of life too.
I don't think you can isolate speaking in one area of your life. I think it's all connected. I think it's kind of a greater, speaking is just a symptom of how you feel about yourself, I think. And so when I'm helping someone feel better at work, that might be related to how they feel about themselves as a person, some beliefs they have about how good they are, how hard they should be working, how lovable, likable, what kind of energies they should be in, like they should never be angry or should never be quiet. All of those things kind of come up, and they're all related to who you are as a person and how you see yourself.
Okay. So when you're speaking coaching, do you almost feel like you ever veer into therapy in a way? Because it sounds like you're unearthing beliefs that people have. And what would the common ones that you hear be often, like beliefs that keep people from being much more confident speakers?
Yeah, I'm not a therapist, and I'll be very clear about that. I'm not a therapist. If I ever feel like someone might need therapy, I'll refer them to a therapist. Okay. But yeah, a lot of what we do is very related to how you see yourself, your mindset, rather than your skill set. So, like, for example, what's something you struggled with speaking in like your early communication journey?
For me, being naturally softer in my tone, I think I needed to stretch my rubber band of what being loud was to me. This is a perfect volume. Maybe it's even a little loud, whereas maybe a colleague of mine would have a much more commanding presence only because of their volume. So that was a big thing for me.
Yeah. So that's a really good example of a mindset block, because the theory of how to speak louder is quite straightforward. It's just speak louder, right? But it must have felt really uncomfortable to you when you tried to do that.
Definitely.
Yeah. What do you think the kind of mindset you had about speaking loud? Like, what's the fear of speaking louder for you?
That for other people it's natural, but for me, I'm being performative when I'm speaking louder.
Yeah. Also, it feels performative, and performative is bad. We don't like performative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the devil. We don't want to be performative. We want to be authentic and, I don't know, real and raw. And so I think I had to stretch out of that, especially when talking to clients, because you have a lot of big personalities in one room, especially if you're on a call with multiple people. And that's something I've been able to get better at, but I had to be very conscious of it. And I don't even think I was conscious of it when I first started learning how to be a better speaker.
Yeah. Learning to speak can feel uncomfortable because you are embodying a version of yourself that you haven't embodied before. And it might be for you, it might be energy. So, like, I want to speak louder with more energy, more assertiveness, perhaps. And that feels uncomfortable because it feels performative.
And you take your students from struggling with these fears to transformation, to growth, to speaking with confidence. What would you say if someone's listening and they're thinking, I'm shy, I'm anxious, I don't really sound polished when I speak? Occasionally I can get it together, but in general, when I speak off the cuff, I'm not that good. Like, would transformation work for me? What would you say to that person?
And say it's not true that you're not good. I've never seen anyone ever who's not like capable of becoming the kind of speaker they want to become. I've never seen someone who's like fundamentally broken at speaking. But I would say to them, I think the first thing that you want to do if you're trying to learn speaking is to stop avoiding speaking. I think it's really easy to get caught in a cycle of watching podcasts or TED Talks or listening to, I don't know, listening to the radio or reading books in order to improve your speaking instead of actually speaking. And like, you don't get better at it without speaking. So whether that's by yourself in your bedroom and you put a little timer on and you practice your daily stand up that you do at work, or whether that's finding a community of people like Ultra Speaking or Toastmasters or like a local running club where you can speak in front of other people and try out new versions of yourself without it feeling like a really big deal.
Mm,
Uh, that makes a huge difference.
I like that. New versions of yourself. Do you see your students turn into new versions of themselves when they go through coaching with you? And what's, if you have one, like a success story you're proud of something you've seen a student do that inspired you or shocked them when they went through that?
There are so many. You can see it in the moment. And maybe you've seen this as you're doing the Ultra Speaking course. You can see the moment where someone realizes that they can speak in a different way. Maybe it's like they try on a powerful energy for the first time. Maybe they try pausing for the first time. And you can see that they're physically speaking differently. And so that's one sign that it's going well. But then the biggest success sign is a student comes back to me after a session and says something like, oh, I tried speaking up at work this week. I raised my hand in a meeting and it went really well. Or I gave a presentation at work and people came up to me afterwards and said, wow, that was so good. The one that I heard the other day was I gave a presentation and usually it takes me 4 hours to prepare and to write a script and to lose sleep overnight and think about it. And this time I just went, gave the presentation. I knew what I wanted to talk about, but I didn't worry about it in advance. I didn't have a script, and people said I looked really natural and authentic, and they loved it.
Yeah, speaking really does have to do so much with how you feel. I am doing the Ultra Speaking course, and listeners, it's a 5-week course that Ultra Speaking does where you learn each week how to master different elements of your voice and become more powerful as a communicator, really. And part of what they say often is, which sounds counterintuitive, but speak before you think, which, if you're prone to overthinking, sounds so scary, but it flips you into more of a natural state where you're going and you're leading with your energy. And something about it just allows you to shift out of a lot of the self imposed rules that we think we have to follow. And then once you leave thinking behind for a little bit, you kind of pull yourself into that.
Yeah, speak before you think is such a controversial one because anyone who has any kind of analytical job or has ever based their self-worth on their ability to get things right, they will want to think before they speak to make sure they're saying the right thing. But for me, it's kind of the foundation of all confidence in speaking. Because if you're telling yourself you have to think before you speak every single time that you speak, you're
Mm-hmm.
telling yourself, I don't trust what comes out of my mouth naturally. I only trust it once I've put it through filter A, B, and C, and then it's finally ready for the world. And so what we're doing, what you're doing in that course at Ultra Speaking, is telling you, okay, just for a little bit, just for the first time, try removing all of those filters and trusting the first thing that comes out of your mouth. And you might find out that it's pretty good. And then when you can do that, we can add in loads of other ways to help you feel like you are saying the right thing and getting it right. But if you can't speak without thinking, then like you don't trust yourself, and that is not the way to become a confident speaker.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good segue, I think, into your transformation. You obviously had to learn to trust yourself, and I want to make sure I get this right. I saw your bio, and it says helping people worry less about speaking, formerly shy and stressed out by interactions like booking an appointment or buying a sandwich, which I'm sure now is cute and funny, but it hints at something that was prevalent in your day-to-day life. So tell me about that transformation. What happened?
Yeah, I don't remember a time as a child where I wasn't shy. Maybe when I was very young, but I remember from the ages of maybe 7, 8, 9, 10, that whenever I had to do anything that involved speaking to anyone that wasn't a close friend, it felt really terrifying. And that meant whenever I went to like the dentist or the hairdressers or the doctors, for example, my mother would drop me off outside and I would ring the doorbell, but I was too afraid to ring the doorbell because when you ring the doorbell at the dentist, the receptionist asks and says, "Hello, who is it? Would you like to come in?" And I was really, for some reason, really afraid that I would get that interaction wrong in some way and say something really embarrassing, like mess up my name or mess up the time of my appointment, or oh my goodness, she doesn't even have the appointment. And I was so afraid of that feeling of embarrassment that I avoided any kind of situation like that. And that might have been buying a sandwich. That might have been in university. It was like any time I had to go and see my tutors and knock on their door, I would spend like 10 minutes walking in a circle in front of their door, building up the courage to knock on their door for them to say, "Come in." And it was really like, when I think about that now, that's super debilitating. The idea, like all of these things that I do every day, like go to the supermarket or call people up, the idea that I couldn't do them, my life was so much harder because of that. But it wasn't like I didn't think that in the time. I kind of thought, I'm happy to live with this. This is how I am. I don't want to do the work it would require to become a confident speaker because it might turn me into the kind of person I don't like, which is someone who talks too much, someone who takes up too much space, someone who says embarrassing things. And that the thought of that was even scarier than the thought of just finding out really weird ways to get through life without speaking to people.
So that permeated almost every aspect of your life, pretty much any interaction that wasn't with the person you already knew. And now you coach people on how to speak exceptionally well with people they don't know, and you even coach other communication coaches. So what was the big turning point for you? And if you could kind of share why it's made such a big difference in your life for someone who's maybe on the fence, like, should I spend time worrying about my communication skills? I have like base level or I'm getting by. Why is it so impactful that you've made this shift?
Mm. So it was a long journey. There wasn't like one day where I woke up and I was like, yes, today is the day I'm going to be a different person. It started with therapy. And in that therapy, I was able to just look at the way I'd been thinking about the world and all of these rules I'd made for myself to protect myself from speaking. Rules like when I go to someone's house and they offer me a drink, I will say no, thank you, because it's much easier than them then saying like, would you like water or orange juice or Diet Coke, and then me choosing something they don't have in their house, and it gets very stressful. And so I would have these little rules in place that would protect me from speaking up. And going to therapy, I just realized how many of them I had in place and how random they were, like how totally not connected to the real world they were, and how much I'd like put all this pressure on myself to be a certain way that wasn't necessarily an easier or a better way of living. And so doing that helped me come out of my shell a little bit. It helped me break those rules a little bit and try on different versions of myself. The version that says, yes, please, I would like some tap water. I've now graduated to the version that just says the thing that I actually want to drink and doesn't worry whether or not they have it. That's been a big deal. And then that got me to the stage where I could kind of function, I guess. So I could apply for jobs, do interviews. I had friends. I felt kind of normal, but I was still really afraid of speaking. And it came up more and more as I was working as a data analyst in London. I would have to start presenting my work to clients. And I remember we went on a client meeting once with my CEO, and there were two clients there, him and me. And I sat through the entire meeting of an hour without saying a single thing. And at the end, he very politely gave me a piece of feedback that I have to talk when I'm in meetings. Otherwise, the clients won't know why I'm there. And they'll find it a bit strange, especially if I'm the one managing and leading the project. And that's when I found Ultra Speaking. And I took the same course that you're taking now, the fundamentals course. And that's the course that allowed me to really shift my mindset in speaking, to trust myself, to learn that I did actually have the ability to be a good speaker. I wasn't fundamentally broken and terrible at speaking. And just that belief that it gave me totally changed my life in every single aspect of speaking and communication. And so if someone is on the fence about whether or not they should invest in communication training, I would say that I didn't know what my life would look like after I did it. I thought I'd just get better at presenting in meetings. I now no longer present in meetings. I lead 100-person workshops. I'm a public speaking coach. I've quit that job because I discovered a whole new version of myself. And so many more opportunities have opened up to me now that I'm able to ask for them.
Did you ever imagine this would happen? I mean, if you think back to 10-year-old and then even college year you, what shocks you the most about who you are now?
The fact that I like speaking. I'm enjoying this conversation with you right now. I think it's fun. The fact that, I mean, obviously the fact that I'm a public speaking coach would have blown my mind. But I would say I'm probably like a 99% different person than I was back then in pretty much every way. And it's because I now believe that I'm capable of speaking to people, that I am worthy of being part of a conversation. And that feels kind of nice when I wake up in the morning.
Hi, Celeste here. I wanted to take a quick break to let you know that if you're loving these lessons on becoming a more confident communicator, then I've created something just for you. It's my free Notion template called the Conversation Compass. You can get it by clicking the link in the top of the show notes of this episode. It's packed with Socratic principles, actionable questions, and a practice log to help you actually turn these ideas into a real skill. So if you're ready to go from just listening to how to be a better communicator to applying it in your life, then click the link in the top of the show notes to get the Conversation Compass. All right, now back to the show. Yeah, I imagine it does with a transformation like that. Confident communication, that's something, it's always a buzzy topic. Everyone says they want to be a confident communicator. I'm sure your students, when they come to you, that's a word that comes up often. How do you define that? Because I think everyone has a little bit of a different version, and maybe they have an archetype of a person that they think, oh, that president or prime minister or pop star is a confident communicator. But how do you define it for your students and even for yourself?
It's a really good question. And there are a million different ways to answer this question. The way I look at it is not external. So an external way of looking at that might be like confident communicators pause a lot, or they vary their energy a lot, or they tell stories, or they have good body language. They sound charming. And I think that is one part of confident communication, but I think it's a consequence of the internal stuff, which is how you feel on the inside when you're speaking. And I think that confident communicators, firstly, they are not afraid of feeling nervous. So they know that it might happen, and they know that they might make a mistake, but they still do it anyway, because they know that they can do a good job even if they're feeling nervous. They're not afraid of making mistakes because they know that they can recover when they make a mistake, and most people won't even notice. And they feel like they have some kind of mission or something that they want to share. It's a mindset that goes away from like, I want to be perfect when I speak, or I want to look really good, and towards something like, I really want to help people, or I think this idea is really important, I'm excited to share it. I think that's what makes people confident. It's an internal feeling rather than an external way of presenting yourself.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense to me. And I consume a lot of communication related content, obviously for researching for the podcast and then for my own self education. And a lot of it does feel helpful to an extent. Like you're saying, pause more, that makes you sound confident. But it does have this surface level feel to it because it doesn't always get to the reason that the person pauses or the reason that the person can use big body language. And it's more like you're talking about the mindset that those other things come naturally once you have that. So, okay, I wonder if, say, I'm a student, I'm coming to you,
Yeah.
you coach hundreds of students through transformation. Let's start at the very beginning. Someone comes to you, they say, I want to speak with confidence. Where do you take them right from the very first step?
It's actually related to what you just said about getting to the root of the problem. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to try and figure out the root of the problem. So they might say, I'm struggling with confident speaking. I'm just going to ask them a bunch of questions. Where does that come up for you? How does it present itself? Do you find that some people find that they ramble, for example, or that they speak too loud, they get too excited. Others find that they get really quiet and they go blank and they stop speaking. So there's loads of different symptoms you can have that will be like the symptom of a deeper root cause. And what I want to do as a coach is figure out what's the fear that you have that's holding you back. Once I have that, then we can start challenging it. Then we can start getting you to speak in a way that might help you kind of tickle that fear. So for you, for example, if you're struggling speaking louder, I might ask you to speak with that kind of energy, embody the energy you want. And it might feel performative and it might feel theatrical. And that's great because then we have something to work with. Then we can be like, okay, when it speaks like that, it feels performative. How come? Why does that come up for you? And so what we're doing is kind of a mixture of you're speaking and I'm observing you and I'm just reflecting back what I see. And through this kind of process of experimentation, we're going to arrive at a place where you look like how you want to look and you feel like how you want to feel.
You told me when we were chatting earlier that great speaking is as much about mindset as it is about skill set. So, what would you say are the biggest mindset shifts or the most common that someone could take away from this? As you likely have this one, and here's how I recommend you shift it so that you can become more confident when you speak.
The biggest one that applies to everyone would be that how you feel on the inside isn't necessarily how you look on the outside. So a lot of people have a tendency to almost narrate their internal dialogue while they're speaking. So they might feel like they're doing a bad job. So they're going to somehow narrate it and say something like, oh, I know this isn't going well, or I'm sorry, I just stumbled over my words. They might say something like, I'm sorry, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare this presentation, so it's going to be a little bit bare bones, or something like that. And what you're doing there is you are assuming that the audience knows how you feel on the inside, that because you feel like you're going to do a bad job and you feel like your heart is beating or you're sweating or you're shaking, the audience can see that. And it's not true. Most of those symptoms of nervousness are internal. They're completely invisible to the audience. And like how well or not you know your content is also kind of invisible to your audience until you really mess it up. And so what you're doing when you're narrating your internal dialogue is you are shooting yourself in the foot. You are forcibly making yourself do a bad job by drawing attention to it and telling everyone you're doing a bad job. And that means you don't get the chance to do a good job. And so the mindset shift is really understanding that even though you feel nervous or horrible on the inside, you can be doing a good job on the outside. And that makes me feel really confident when I speak, because no matter what's happening, I still feel almost safe that it's going to be okay.
It's interesting. We sometimes are our own biggest critics and our own biggest enemies when it comes to speaking. I know that in the corporate world where I spend a lot of time, it is very common, and it's almost like a badge of honor to be a little self-deprecating sometimes and say like, oh, this isn't very good, or oh, I just threw this together, I hope you guys like it, that sort of thing. But it actually is just damaging your ethos and making people not think you're credible to listen to. And nobody who's in a really high position of power would ever be their own critic out loud, at least. So that's a really good reminder. Are there any tools that you give your students that you notice, okay, that's an instant shift? I give my student this tip or tool and they can just turn it on. Is there something like that that we could try in our own lives?
Yeah, when we're dealing with being confident, a big tip would be ending strong. So a lot of us end our speaking like a little bit, almost like the worst part of our speaking, because suddenly we're realizing that we have to say something important. Everyone's looking at us, we're ending it. And we might say something like, so yeah, that's all I have to say on that. And in reality, the ending is the most important part of your speech, because people will tend to remember the best part of your speech and the end of your speech. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you are always ending really confident on your own terms. A simple way you can do that is say something like thank you at the end of a presentation. But if you're speaking more informally, like right now, I can't say thank you to you at the end of every like answer that I give you. That would be weird. I might use something called a summary prompt. A summary prompt is a sentence that prompts your brain to summarize what you just said. The most simple one is something like in summary. I often use one that's, I guess what I'm trying to say is, or the main point that I'm trying to make is, it's any sentence that feels good in your language, but you're almost like ChatGPT prompting your brain and saying, brain, the most important thing I just said is, and then it will complete the sentence for you. And when you end your speaking like that, results are transformative. It's almost like you're 10x more confident just because you end your speech with a bang, a summary of what you just said.
That's true. I was just at a conference and it was 4 days, 10 speakers a day, and I did remember the endings. And some of them, they were leaders in their industry, prominent in what they do, but the end they would kind of trail off and say, yeah, so thank you, or that's it, or just a very lackluster ending that kind of fizzled out for me. And it's not that their presentation wasn't valuable, but it did leave less of an impactful taste in my mouth after hearing everything they knew and then just hearing it go downhill. So that's a good reminder.
It's a shame a bit. You do all this good work thinking about it and planning your presentation, and then you tank it at the end, you know.
But we can always grow. We can always do better the next presentation. I'd like to do some rapid fire. Just tell me what comes to mind when I ask you these questions, because you have so much data with all the hundreds of students you've coached. So when it comes to things that hold someone back from sounding confident, what would you say are the biggest things?
Fear of silence, fear of conviction. So using words like it's crucial, it's vital, it's really important, I really believe in this. Scripting, or rehearsing too much and not letting their authentic, fun, personable way of speaking come through. Overthinking. So they overthink so much that they're hesitating every single time that they speak. Being really abstract, because it feels quite scary to like tell a story, for example, or to say what you really think on a subject. Oftentimes I will give a client a title like, what does powerful communication mean to you? And instead of answering it like how they really see it, which might be something like powerful communication would be the ability to get promoted because my boss is always overlooking me and I really want to just speak up and have them hear my voice in a meeting. They might say something really abstract like powerful communication comes down to three things. The first one is speaking up louder. The second one is pausing more. The third one is, so in conclusion, powerful communication is XYZ. And it's a shame because it sounds good, but you're not really saying anything and you don't feel super good after it because you haven't really shared your opinion.
Why do we do that?
Because it feels safer. Because it's the kind of stuff you could find on Wikipedia. It feels important. It feels good to speak in that way. It feels like you're saying something clever and it's safe. No one is ever going to tell you off speaking in that way. If you speak in a meeting with your three main points of not much, no one's going to come up to you afterwards and say, Celeste, you did a terrible job. They're going to say, you sounded pretty like organized and competent. It's a huge risk to change up that status quo and say what you actually think in the way that you actually want to say it. So I understand why.
What is the cost of playing it safe with communication? We've talked a lot about fear is a big thing that holds people back, discomfort, which is adjacent to that. There's a lack of safety. You said competent communicators create that safety for themselves. What's the cost of playing it safe and not speaking out or going off script, quote unquote?
I genuinely think that cost is huge. Like for me, 4 years ago, every single idea I had at work, I never mentioned it. Right? Like I only mentioned it when asked for my opinion. Anything novel or different, I never brought up. And like maybe some of those ideas were duffs, but now every idea I have about work, I mention it. And some of them have been really good, and some of them have changed the way that we run the company or change the impact that we have on one single student. And that's just like a work related example. Showing your ideas more might mean that you have an impact on people more. But can you imagine if you consistently have the bravery to take a risk and speak up about something you want to speak up about? Not only will you have more of an impact on how your work is going, how your life is going, how your friends are going, you're also going to be more noticed, more visible. People are going to think of you when they think of promotions. They're going to think of you when they want to invite someone to a party. They're going to think of you when they think of the person they want to call and they haven't chatted to in a while. And those sound like small things, like getting a phone call from a friend, cool. But can you imagine that if you do that consistently, you're consistently getting more calls from friends, you're consistently going to more parties, you're consistently getting promoted at work. And that's a totally different life. That's a totally different number of opportunities that you have. So I think it is a huge risk because it could go badly, but if you don't take that risk, you are losing 99% of those opportunities for the 1% that might go badly.
Yeah. And I think it's so meaningful coming from you who had the completely opposite starting point where you were basically missing out on 99% of life because of fear and anxiety. So probably when you say that to your students, it means a great deal to them of, I really could change my life the way that Alienor's changed hers. Do you have
Can I
any? Oh.
Sorry, can I also say, I think it's really important here because this is what I would have been afraid of, is I didn't become the person I hated. Like, I don't hate myself now, right? I speak up a lot more and I take up more space, but I'm not that horrible person. I hope you can tell me, but I'm not that horrible person who's super attention seeking or who never stops talking. Like that big fear didn't happen. So the downside that you have in your head, the imagined version of you that might be really horrible, is like you probably won't become them because you are who you are.
Right. Okay, so if a listener is thinking, I know it's important, I want to work on my communication, what can I do in my daily life that's practical? to actually become this better version of myself, this more free, confident version, what would you say they could implement?
The single biggest thing you can implement is take more speaking opportunities and do them before you're ready. So if you're at a presentation and someone asks, does anyone have any questions? Raise your hand before you know what the answer is, like before you know what the question is. You will come up with it on the fly, and it might be scary once, but if you do that a couple of times, you will realize that you can do that. And that's another skill in your bucket. When you go to dinner with friends, share that funny story or thought that was sparked in your mind about a book that you read and see what happens. Maybe it'll spark a new conversation. So the first tip is definitely seek out more opportunities to speak in a way that feels kind of safe, and not like, don't do it in front of your CEO while you're asking for a big promotion. Do it do it somewhere subtle. And the next thing you want to do is you want to practice speaking in the same way that you're going to do it in real life. So a lot of us get the practice wrong when we're preparing a presentation. What we tend to do is we tend to like write out everything we want to talk about, and then we condense our ideas in writing, and then we turn that into a script, and then we present that. And what we're doing there is we're spending like 80% of our time writing and 20% of our time speaking. For some of us, speaking is the first time you actually speak the presentation the whole way through. Everything else before is just thinking. And it's also the first time you're doing it in front of an audience. So there's a lot of unknowns there. It's the first time you're speaking. It's the first time you're in front of an audience. It's bound to feel really nerve-wracking. What you want to do instead is, as early as possible, get yourself in front of an audience. And that might be through a community, a local Toastmasters club, an ultra speaking club. That might be speaking up in meetings. But you want to simulate that pressure. For some people, even putting a camera, like recording themselves, can help because it adds a little bit of pressure. You want to simulate that adrenaline spike that will happen when you're giving a big presentation in your preparation, so that you know that you could handle it. Because what you're not preparing really are the things you're going to say. You prepare them a little bit, but you probably know what they are. Unless it's like a really big foreign presentation, you're probably really good at your job and you probably know what you're talking about. What you're preparing is how to handle that adrenaline. So that's what you want to do as much as possible.
So practice. Essentially, you need to practice, get a little uncomfortable, stretch yourself, even if it feels bad. I wonder, do students come back to you and say, do they ever say, I didn't like it, I don't want to do it again? Is it always a happy story where they're like, I did it and it felt so scary but happy, like I was jumping off a ledge? What are the kind of holdbacks that people come back to you and say, I did it, but XYZ happened and now I don't know if I did it right?
Ooh, I don't think I've ever had someone come back to me and say I did it, but it didn't go well.
Really?
Or I didn't do it right. Sometimes in the moment when we're working together and I'll make them practice the speech or do some kind of speaking rep, they'll say, I didn't love that one. It felt performative. It felt different. And I can see it. And I'm like, okay, that was a mistake. Let's try a different avenue. But
Okay.
In real life, maybe people just don't come back. Maybe I'm not hearing from them.
Or maybe we make it out to be scarier than it is. And when we actually do it in real life, it's freeing in a way.
It never goes as badly as you think it will. Like, I've had some bad case scenarios of speaking that I thought were the worst possible case, where I was speaking in front of 30 people or 100 people and I felt like I made a mistake or I went blank. That's happened to me. It happened to me recently, actually. And it's like the worst case scenario that I could possibly imagine. And in reality, no one noticed. It went fine. Or if they did notice, they forgot about it because I did all the other things well. Like, I still paused and I still ended strong and I left a good impression. So I think sometimes we over sensationalize in our brain what might happen in the worst case scenario.
Very true. Okay, hot takes. What is your most controversial communication opinion?
One of them is that I don't hate filler words. A lot of people come to me because they want to get rid of their ums and their ahs. And for a small percentage of the population, there is an issue. they really do and ah quite a lot, and they have a big resistance to pausing before speaking. But for a lot of us, I don't even notice it when they're speaking. What they really need might be a bit more confidence, pausing, a bit more comfort in the silence, and the filler words will disappear slowly when you become more comfortable taking time to think of the next thing you want to say. But I just generally don't think that in most situations they sound that bad.
So you're not anti-filler word, you're not anti-like or occasionally.
Occasionally, used with, with caution, like there, used with caution and personality, how you usually would talk with friends. If it's going to make you more wooden to try and get rid of them, don't. Just trust the process. The more confident you become, the less filler words you will have.
I like that. I do have an entire episode dedicated to how to stop saying like and it is a popular one, so I know people struggle with it, but I do think it's true. There is a little natural element in it. If you have completely none, it might sound robotic.
I guess that's why I chose that one, because it's the most controversial of all of my opinions. But for sure, I guess what I'm saying is it's not the first thing I would treat. It's the last thing I would treat. Everything else is far more important.
If you could take all of your coaching knowledge, your experience as a public speaking coach, and say, this is what makes someone a truly confident speaker, what is it?
Resilience. It's the ability to make a mistake and keep going, the ability to feel like it's going wrong and keep going, the ability to speak badly yesterday and get up tomorrow and do it again better, the ability to feel nervous and embrace that and think, okay, cool, I'm feeling nervous, but I'm also quite looking forward to this. So yeah, for me, a confident speaker is someone who does not give up at the first sign of turbulence. They're someone who thinks, turbulence, cool. Let me fly around that and let's keep going.
What would a practical example of being a resilient speaker look like in someone's life? Or it could be a corporate or even social setting, but what would an example of that look like?
Ooh, that's a very good question. It would be any time someone stumbles, for example, not letting that derail and carrying on speaking, almost adding more energy. Like a few times, I think, even in this podcast, but often I will stumble over my words, and instead of stopping, I will just double down on what I just said and recover even more. It'll be pausing for as long as it takes while they're going blank. So instead of going blank, letting it overwhelm you and saying, I'm sorry, I'm going blank. Can you give me a minute? It'll be trusting that the blank won't last very long. The longest I've really ever seen with my clients is about 20 seconds. And on average, most of the blanks I see them much less than that, about 5 seconds, maybe 10. So trusting while they're blank, just it looks like a pause on the outside. So just pausing and then continuing to speak. That would be an example of resilience.
I know a lot of us are afraid of the pause. You, even throughout this conversation, have demonstrated you're very calm with the pause. You take your time to collect your thoughts. What do you think prevents people from doing that and makes us feel like we need to rush to fill a silence?
There are so many different reasons I've heard. Some people feel like if they go quiet, their thoughts will stop moving and they'll go blank. Some people feel like if they go quiet, they will just look stupid and people will think they have nothing left to say. Some people are afraid that if they go quiet, they'll get interrupted and they won't be able to finish their train of thought. There's a whole bunch of different fears you might have around silence, but the only way to overcome it is to try it and exaggerate it. Because if it's a bit like dog years and human years, it's going to feel like 7 years on the inside and it's going to look like 7 seconds on the outside. And when you do that and you realize that you can pause in a confident way and people don't interrupt you, that was a big game changer for me.
Is there any communication lesson or insight you've come along in your journey that you wish you knew sooner, that you would tell your younger self or even your clients now?
It took me a really long time to figure out that I was never going to speak like Barack Obama. I'd always admired his pausing. I'd always, not just him, but also Brené Brown, for example, I thought was a brilliant speaker. There are so many examples of speakers that I used to watch on YouTube. And on my journey, especially as I became a public speaking coach, I noticed that I still wasn't becoming like them. And it really frustrated me. I was like, why am I not? I'm a public speaking coach. Why don't I speak like all of these amazing people yet? And it finally I finally came to the realization that I'm never going to be like that because that's not who I am. I have different strengths. I'm a little bit more energetic. I tell jokes. I'm a little bit excitable sometimes when I speak. And those are my strengths. And that's what people say they really like about me when I lead workshops and when I speak. Those are the things that get rewarded. So the shift that I'd want to tell my younger self is you don't have to be like someone else to be great. You can do it the way you are by doubling down on the things that you love about yourself. And that will be very much good enough.
I think that's a very inspiring and uplifting note to end on. Alienor Hunter, thank you so much for coming on A Better Way to Say. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
People can find me at Ultra Speaking if they want to do a course. They can find me on LinkedIn. And that's pretty much it for now.
Okay. Perfect. I will link everything below. So if you guys want to check out Alienor, you definitely can, and Ultra Speaking as well. Like I said, I'm going through the course, so I'll definitely do a recap once I've been through it for everyone listening. But thanks again, Alienor, for being on the show. We loved having your pearls of wisdom, and I wish you the best with your clients and whatever you go do moving forward.
Thank you, Celeste. This was really fun.
Thanks for tuning in to A Better Way to Say. Be sure to follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even YouTube now. And if you want even more communication tips, resources, you can get the Conversation Companion at the link in the description. So feel free to check that out if you would find it helpful. Last but not least, if you have episode requests or other things you would like to hear me talk about, guests you would like me to have on, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach me at betterwaytosaypod@gmail.com. Until next time, speak well.